It's that time of the year yet again when candy canes and Christmas cookies rule many parts of the world, just as sweet and savory flavors dominate the streets of South Korea. So what's selling on the streets this winter? What's the response to fusing Korean snacks and Western flavors? And what can be done to keep alive the experience of indulging in winter snacks on the streets of Korea? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today we delve into the comfort food available here in Korea during the colder months of the year. And for that, I have Andres Sanchez Braun here in the studio. Andres, welcome back.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Right. I also have Matthew Weigand with us. Matthew, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's great to be here again.
Right. Andres, among the most popular street food here in the country during the winter, of course, is Punggopang. Now, for the sake of our viewers who may not be familiar with this winter snack, perhaps you could tell us a bit about it, including your first experience with it.
Well, Punggopang is actually a fish-shaped sweet snack. It's kind of like a waffle. It's actually made with something similar to a waffle press. Ingredients are, well, wheat flour, baking powder, water, sometimes maybe egg or milk. And the stuffing is basically, or at least the traditional one, is patso, which is red bean sweet marmalade, which is not very sweet. And that's actually one of the reasons that I really like Punggopang, is because I'm not into really, really sweet food. And actually the first time that I tried it, I was very pleasantly surprised. Now, modern toppings, of course, now come in all shapes and colors. There's like chocolate, there's custard, there's koguma cream cheese, which is sweet potato cream cheese. There's even pizza toppings stuffed into the Punggopang. So, I mean, they're putting like mozzarella, tomato sauce, etc. Although this is normally not the kind of topping that you would get from a street vendor. They normally stick to the traditional patso filling or maybe the custard. And also interesting to point out, Punggopang does stem from Japanese taiyaki, but there's a difference because taiyaki actually literally in Japanese means grilled sea bream. So the snack actually is shaped like a sea bream, whereas Punggopang means carp bread. So the Korean one is actually shaped like a carp. It's a different fish.
Right, I see. Matthew, another all-time favorite here is Hotok. And some people claim that even Santa Claus will not be able to resist it if he had it with a glass of milk, of course. So what do you say, and how do you like Hotok?
Well, I like it pretty good. It's similar to kind of shape and size of an English muffin. It's kind of little skinny on the top, and then it's round, and it's filled with stuff. It's got, usually the traditional thing that they put in there is sugar, honey, peanuts, cinnamon, and then they take the dough, and then they deep fry it. Although I hear that now there's a new kind which is baked and kind of like expands a lot, which reminds me of a sopapilla. But the traditional one is fried and has like sweet stuff in the center, and you can just eat it. It's kind of like a filled donut. But like Andreas was saying, it's also not really that sweet compared to what you're used to like in the US or in Europe, which is kind of like a new experience. I feel like a lot of the sweets and the snacks in the US are like overpoweringly sweet. And it's nice to get something that's just like medium, just a little bit of sweetness and not that much. Ironically, Hotok, when I was looking up the history of it, apparently it comes from China. There were like, at some point in Korean history, there were a lot of Chinese immigrants that brought in this kind of pastry, this street food. And the original meaning of the word Hotok is barbarian's rice cake. So.
Sounds delicious, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Some street food coming from the east, some street food's coming from the west.
Right, fusion of both then. Andres, for those in search of something hot to drink, that is, while on the streets this winter, there is, of course, the cup of broth that comes with Omok. Now, for some people, they say that with regard to Omok, it's the whole experience of eating it out in the street with your cup of hot broth, of course, and it adds tremendously to the taste. What are your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the best omok I've ever had was actually in Busan, which is the city where the omok industry first flourished, right? I remember it wasn't actually that cold that day, but it was pouring rain. So it was kind of, the kind of day when it's very like damp and very unpleasant. It was probably maybe just late winter or early spring, but it was a very, very, very unpleasant day, I remember. And I was around Haeundae Beach, which is an area that has undergone a lot of, transformation, lots of new buildings being built, traditional shops disappearing, street vendors disappearing, etc. But there's still Cheongdong Sijang, the traditional market in Haeundae-gu. And there's this shop called Sanggukine, and it's wonderful. I want to say they made my day, literally that day. I think just, tasting the fish cake and then drinking the broth, it was literally like rebirth, I want to say.
Right, and this is a place over in Busan, you're saying? I need to check that place out then. Matthew, aside from snacks at the street stalls now, we have the Hopong that is sold at convenience stores this time of the year. And as Andres mentioned earlier, Matthew, with regard to Hopong, you have a range of flavors. They fuse a lot of these Western flavors as well, including pizza topping, which I think Andres earlier mentioned that he was not too fond of. But what are your thoughts on fusing Korean snacks with Western flavors?
Oh yeah, it's, I think it's a good idea. That's like one of the things that I like a lot about living in Seoul. It feels like a lot of people in Seoul take trips overseas and travel a lot, and then they find something that they like, and then they bring it back to Seoul, and they open up a new shop, or they introduce a new flavor of some traditional food or something like that. So I feel like it's a good way to experience a lot of little, like a curated version of what's going on in other cities around the world and other countries. So like the Hopong is with different flavors, it's really good. Like Hopong it's one of those foods that looks like it comes out of a cartoon. It's extremely fluffy and round, and it just looks like it's got good stuff in there. You don't know what's in there because it's completely covered, but once you bite into it, you can pretty much find anything good in there, like the red bean stuff that we talked about before, and also some savory meat or something like that. And so I think that's part of the fun of buying it and eating it as you're walking down the street. You can get something new that you never even expected before.
Right. Andres, roasted chestnuts, known as kunbam here, and kun koguma, that's roasted sweet potatoes, of course, they're quite popular. And I hear nutritionists in recent times have actually talked about the importance of having chestnuts in your diet during the winter. Do you care to elaborate?
Yeah, actually, all nuts in general are pretty healthy. So everyone, please try to have as many nuts as you can. But in particular, you're right. Chestnuts are very healthy, and because they're basically seasonal nuts. These are the months when we can actually enjoy them. But in particular, chestnuts have these kind of acids, these polyphenols, that are, for example, very good when it comes to regulating sugar levels in blood, for example. And then, for example, combined with vitamin C, also contained in chestnuts, that's pretty good for inflammation, for example, to regulate inflammation. And then again, these acids are also good, for example, for blood pressure. And finally, high fiber content. So all in all, a very, very healthy food. I'd also like to point out that in Madrid, the city where I come from, roasted chestnuts are also a very famous street cold weather snack. And actually, we use chestnuts in a bunch of seasonal recipes. We used it in like soups. We make puree. We even make like sweet custard with it. So very, very popular in Spain too, and very healthy.
Right, quite universal then. And speaking about being popular elsewhere as well, Matthew, kunbam and kun koguma, they're also quite popular up in North Korea. And that being said, on a rather somber note now, I understand that these roasted chestnuts and roasted sweet potatoes up in North Korea are used as a form of propaganda of sorts, that is. Do you care to elaborate on that?
Yes, there are some stories coming out about that. Now, the stories that we get from North Korea are always, a little bit dodgy, a little bit suspect, because it's hard to verify everything that happens up there. But the word is that there's been a lot of chestnuts showing up in street stalls in Pyongyang that are being sold for about half of the regular price, only 50% of the regular cost that you would find in a regular store. And the story behind that is that the government is trying to somehow reward the citizens that live in Pyongyang with these cut-rate chestnuts. And how they're getting a hold of them is apparently they are using the military might of North Korea to declare war on chestnut trees by getting the soldiers to go and collect them. And they have a daily quota of how much chestnuts they should get, and they should turn them in, and they have to go spend however long it takes to get as many chestnuts as their quota is. And there's another wrinkle, which is that North Korea often uses its soldiers in this way to do farm-related or construction-related tasks, but usually the soldiers are able to take a portion of whatever it is they're harvesting for themselves, which means that the soldiers end up in a slightly privileged position compared to the rest of the country. But supposedly this time, in order to meet the quotas for the cheap chestnuts on the streets of Pyongyang, the soldiers are not able to take any chestnuts at all for themselves. So
I see.
It's even worse than normal situation with the chestnuts in North Korea.
Right. Meanwhile, back here in South Korea, Andres, despite the popularity of the country's street food, there is a bit of concern about the disappearance of street vendors during this time of the season. What are your thoughts regarding this particular sad reality, of course? And are there ways, do you think, to perhaps keep them on the streets, to keep this experience of having street food on the streets during the winter?
Well, I think actually, sadly, I think it's happening in all big cities across the world, the disappearance of street vendors. And it's kind of sad because, street vendors are part of a city's, they're the city's cultural assets as well, right? But then again, it's happening, for example, in Madrid to these chestnut vendors that I was talking about before, or for example, the people that sell wafers. That's another popular snack in Madrid. It's happening to them too. Well, I mean, the reasons behind this don't seem to be very difficult to picture. It's a hard job. It's long hours. You got to be out there in the cold, or if you also sell snacks during the summer, extreme heat. And it's not a job that pays very well. So, of course, my guess would be to have local governments try to support and make things as easy as possible for these people that still want to carry on this tradition. Many, at least in Spain, the case for all these vendors is mainly people inheriting their parents or their relatives' business in this case. So I can think of local governments trying to, for example, lower the fees for renting public space, for example, or lowering the fees for licensing, concession, whatever, because sadly enough, I think if we don't really tackle the issue, they will eventually disappear. Right,
unfortunately. And Matthew, I extend the same question to you. What do you propose to keep the experience of indulging in winter snacks alive? Very brief answer.
Well, it's got to be something that the local government encourages or doesn't discourage. So I've seen some places in Seoul where they've taken out all of the street vendors and replaced them with like plants or something, which is can't get Hopong from plants.
Right.
I'd rather have the Hopong.
Right, me too, anytime, right? All right, Matthew, as always, thank you very much for your time and thoughts today. And Andres, as always, thank you for your insights.
Thanks for having us here.
Right, well, that is all the time for this edition, that is, of Issues and Insiders. We'll be back same time tomorrow with a look at the state of human rights here in this part of the world. Be sure to join us then.